Hello everyone, this is Renault, and I saw this article drop from Bounding in the Comics, and it's an interesting thing about one of the more ridiculous topics. And in Clown World today, there's a lot of ridiculous topics out there. So let's look at this one. And so the headline, Ewan McGregor says, Birds of Prey is a feminist film with a real look on misogyny. Oh, goody. So right off the top, they're taking a fun flick that's supposed to be just a silly little thing, and they're trying to make it real. About real issues, about important issues. Just like how, but this is a flawed premise, because anyone who's familiar with Harley Quinn, and even the Birds of Prey, would know that it wasn't about blurting out how feminist it was. It was just feminist. And what I mean by that is, it kind of reminds me of the story from the Bible. I don't have it memorized, but it's how the rich man should not be openly bragging about how much charity they do, whereas the just person who's trying to do good work just does good work. They don't brag about it, because bragging about what you're doing just dilutes and often reveals hypocrisy, by the way, of what you're doing. And that's just the same thing with this. They're bragging about how it's a feminist film with a real look at misogyny, but in reality, they're probably going to engage in hypocrisy or not really be feminist at all. Whereas the original Birds of Prey was just a feminist. It was a feminist comic without actually, and I don't mean advocating for feminism. I just mean it had everything feminists claim they want: strong, independent women being strong and independent while doing good work or whatever. Whereas this is bragging about feminism, and what it looks like, I haven't seen it yet, is that it's just going to have a bunch of women fighting against strawmen and an actual supervillain, while just bragging about girl power. And it's kind of like a show don't tell. They're telling us it's feminist, but in reality, it's probably not going to be very feminist, as all kinds of progressive things tend to be loudly proclaiming something that turns out not to be the case. Now let's look into this a little bit more. Ewan McGregor plays Black Mask in the upcoming Birds of Prey film. A female-led team-up, it has obvious feminist themes, and McGregor plays up those attributes in a new interview. Speaking with French site Premiere, he explained what attracted him to Birds of Prey and the role of Black Mask. McGregor stated, first, it was the idea of Birds as a feminist film that looks at misogyny. What interested me is that with Birds of Prey is that it's a feminist film. It's very finely written. There is in the script a real look at misogyny. Well, with all due respect, you've got superheroes fighting a supervillain, so that kind of undercuts her message there. And second of all, anyone who's familiar with Harley Quinn, or Harleen Quinzel, her villainous name is Harley Quinn, she's a murderous psycho. Well, she's actually started off as a tragic comedy, where she has a promising career. She falls in love with Joker because his madness is fascinating, and that fascination she misinterpreted as love. And Joker, in return, never cares about her at all. That was her origin. It was actually very well written by Paul Dini and art by Bruce Timm. It was very well done. And Paul Dini is just a fantastic writer. But the story of Harleen Quinzel, Harlequin, has slowly transformed with this modern day iteration of where she's just this girl power who fights against oppression, and that's not what Harley is about ever. She doesn't fit as someone who does that sort of thing. That's Wonder Woman, a DC property. If you want to do that, it's more in character for Wonder Woman to be doing something like that. And she's actually done it very well. She's been something of a feminist icon for a while, and she kind of fits that. Harley, despite being a tragic comedy, is very much like the Joker because she does a lot of what the Joker does. She's a psychopath. She falls into her own version of madness. She's a mass murderer just like the Joker because Joker influenced her. And she threw away a very promising career as a renowned psychiatrist and psychologist because of that madness. When she took her fascination, it turned into madness, which she misinterpreted as love. So, the story of Harley is, and to try and make her as a feminist icon is kind of ridiculous because of the things I mentioned. She's not someone to be admired. She's a mass murderer and a crazy woman. I mean, you can say that that's what feminists idealize, and I would love to argue it, except here they are idealizing it. So I don't know what to say. Feminists love mass murdering psychopaths. I mean, I'd love that to not be true, but as you can see by the reception to this movie, and that's kind of just a fact at this point, not even an opinion. But anyway, Ewan McGregor continues, and I think we need that. We need to be more aware of how we behave with the opposite sex. We need to be taught to change. Well, no, you in Hollywood need to taught to change because you're a den of sexual harassment, misogyny, rape, sexual assault, and pedophilia. I mean, that's pretty rampant in Hollywood, and maybe you and your friends need to be taught to change. But last time I checked, I didn't put a casting couch for somebody to become my housemate. I didn't, invite illegal immigrants into my home and then oppose deportation because, I have less access to children. That's you in Hollywood, Mr. McGregor. Not the average person on the street. And then, McGregor then says there's a line between brutal extreme misogyny, the kind employed by black masters of crime lord in the underworld, and subtle, everyday type of misogyny that happens without thinking, as in the case of perceived mansplaining. And I love how that little point there kind of underscores or contradicts what McGregor's talking about. Black Mask is a supervillain. He's an exaggerated stereotype. If someone's looking for misogyny, they would not look to an exaggerated supervillain. Well, I mean, you shouldn't, but I guess if you're a feminist, then you have no choice. Because, as he goes on, mansplaining has to be perceived. Because it's not something that's real. You have to perceive it. Just like, can you perceive the water bottle? Well, no, I don't really have to perceive a water bottle. I can just pick one up. I don't really need to perceive a computer mouse. I can just pick one up. But you have to perceive these subtle misogyny because it's not real. It's like a microaggression. You have to look for it because out of your imagination, and then misconstrue it as something that it's not. As McGregor says here, misogynists in movies are often extreme. They rape, they beat women, and it's legitimate to resent people like that because they exist and they are obviously the worst. But in the Birds of Prey dialogues, there's always a hint of everyday misogyny, of these things you say as a man, you not even realize. Mansplaining. It's all in the script in a very subtle way. I found that brilliant. Well, Mr. McGregor, if you really cared about misogyny, then I think it would have been interesting if you had just stepped down from the role and have these feminist icons like Psychopath Harley Quinn fight a woman. I mean, you should have stepped down. Just like a lot of these Hollywood directors and producers and actors, they always like to talk big about how much they're doing in fighting for women, and then when they have a chance to actually follow up and practice what they preach, there's just no follow through whatsoever. Well, for example, what's the name of that one idiot who did Star Wars: The Force Awakens and is now directing the the uh, the last Rise of the Skywalkers, J.J. Abrams. He started pissing and moaning and trying to be a good feminist ally for minorities when he talked about how it would be wonderful to have more women directors. Well, then Sargon of Akkad, who love him or hate him, he often does have good points. Pointed out, well, why don't you just step down? And then started the hashtag brown women directors, and so that was trending for a little while. It was like, why didn't J.J. Abrams step down so that a woman could direct? Why doesn't Ewan McGregor step down so that... Well, actually, you know what? That point's not a little bit moot, to be honest. This is kind of a stream of consciousness because I got up in the morning and I had to see that. But I suppose if Ewan McGregor decides to... But it's all Hollywood perception of misogyny, which Hollywood is the last place to lecturing anyone on any sort of morality, given their penchant for pedophilia and covering it up with sexual assaults and all that. But again, you can't really make the Black Mask as this sort of... He epitomizes misogyny when he's a supervillain. He's going to do supervillainy things. I can't wait for the sequel for Birds of Prey, where they battle the non-existent and fictional wage gap. That'll be a hoot. True story. There was actually a comic where that actually happened, and of course it involved theft of people who earned an honest living, and not actual crooks. But that's what feminism is all about, at least modern day feminism. It's about justifying criminal behavior, and apparently with Harley Quinn, it's about justifying psychopath murderers. Psychopathic mass murderers. But it's okay, because she's a woman. Anyway, this is Renault. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.